Chapter 2. The drive to Carson's Lane, 3 miles from Teresa's home, seemed more like a 3-hour drive. She had waited a few days after talking to Randall before she decided it was time to tell her family about her interest in God. Though technically it was her life and her choice, Teresa felt compelled to discuss her decision to become a Christian anyway. Perhaps it was her need for approval, or maybe it was her way of making her decision final. A blue house with warm shutters and a scent of hominess filled Teresa with warmth. Her grandparents had lived here since she could recall, and her younger sister was staying with them until she could get on her feet again. When she pulled up to the house, she was greeted by a German shepherd named Tika and a black Labrador named Larry. Her grandmother was the first person to come out to see her. "My sweet Teresa, I have been hoping you would stop by." Her grandmother wrapped her in a warm embrace. "I'm sorry it's taken me so long to visit. I have been keeping busy with work and such." "Well, all that matters is that you are here now. Are you hungry? Have you been eating? You look slimmer than when I last saw you." "I'm fine, Grandmother, really. I already ate and have actually come here to speak to you, Grandpa, and Sissy about something." "You're sure nothing is wrong? I know we are just getting by here. We're all still missing your mom." "I know. I think of her and Father daily." "Now we need not speak of your father. You know we never got on well." "May I come in for some tea and speak to all of you?" "Well, my dear, that surely goes without saying." The inside of her grandparents' house was filled with knickknacks, photos, and worn furniture. Teresa's grandparents were stuck in the 1940s and never took an interest in the latest gadgets or updating their home. Their house was a far cry from her apartment in the heart of Baltimore. With a cup of cinnamon apple tea in hand, Teresa took in the company that sat before her. Her sister was a blonde with blue eyes and freckles. Her grandfather was a strong teddy bear, and her grandmother had dark hair and wore glasses. They were a family that stuck together and stood firm on whatever they believed in. Grandpa Charlie cleared his throat. "Your grandmother says you have to speak to us about something. Are you in some sort of trouble?" "No, actually, it is just the opposite. I have discovered something, or someone more rather, who I believe could help me cope better with my parents' passing." "Do tell." Cece, Teresa's younger sister, perked up. "I spoke to a preacher a few days ago, and I believe God could help me to heal and find comfort." "God is not welcome in my house," Grandma Elaine snapped. "If you would just give him a chance, I think you would come to see that believing in God is a good thing." "Your grandmother is right. That man took our daughter from us. Parents are not meant to bury their children." "You know, Mom and Dad never believed in God. Don't you think you are going against them by taking this route to find some kind of comfort?" Cece spoke up. "Cece, perhaps they would be glad that I am turning to something that isn't reckless. Trust me, I have given this plenty of thought." "Young lady, how do you know what you want at this point in time? Your grandmother and I are still trying to make sense of your mother's car accident. Perhaps you are grabbing onto the first life raft you see. It's the only thing that would make any sense. You know how this family feels about God. I trust that you won't look any further into this hogwash." "Your grandfather is right. Now I will hear no more talk of this in my house." Teresa set her cup down and, while wiping back tears, walked out of the living room and let herself out. At night, Teresa lay awake, reading a Bible she had bought at the thrift shop. Along with the Bible, she also checked what verses would be more helpful to her in her time of mourning. The store clerk was more than willing to suggest the little pocketbook, saying that it had helped him immensely. Ecclesiastes 3, 1-8 was a reminder to Teresa about the seasons of life. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. She pondered this verse for a while before discovering a love and curiosity for John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. This would become an important verse for Teresa. How could someone give up his child that way? To give up his only son for others like me, no less. What an incredible and frustrating being this God is. A small notebook was already filled with questions for Pastor Jones. Teresa also admired the powerful women of the Bible. She longed to be as strong and wondered if she would ever really be free of the issues that were bothering her. In that moment, her mind drifted back to early March. March 6th had been a busy day for Abigail. Teresa remembered back to her mother's big meeting and how excited she was to finally stand a chance at making head supervisor at work. Although her mother was excited, the weather was gloomy and she had actually considered staying home. Rain pouring like buckets made for almost an impossible travel conditions, but Mrs. Banner knew she had to go. The call came that afternoon. Not only has she gotten the job, but Abigail was also being transferred to a better building closer to her home. It was the next call an hour later which haunted Teresa. Her mother had an hour commute, and partway home she was hit head-on by a semi that had lost control. She died instantly. Teresa suddenly felt a chill and decided it was time to turn in for the night. She fought back tears as she went through her nightly routine. Between her remembrances and how her family had treated her earlier, she started to wonder what kind of a difference turning to God would make. She didn't realize that God always has a plan.